Okay, let's go. The interest that we have in this Sikha is we're telling a story. It's the story of the Jewish people coming to the location, coming to the spot, to the place where the Torah would be given, right? They're coming to Mount Sinai on the first day of the month of Sivan in the year 2448. And something unusual occurred. They achieved a unity, right? The anticipation of this occasion of coming to the place where the Torah would be given affected an unusual occurrence, namely that the Jewish people achieved achdus, the Jewish people achieved a unity. And in this Sikha, we were taught that the unity that the Jewish people achieved consisted of Ish Echad B'Lev Echad, as one man with one heart. Meaning, first of all, they were unified because of who they were, and second of all, they were unified because of what they believed. You need to understand this. First of all, they were unified because of who they were, and second of all, they were unified because of what they believe. Now here's the chap.
Then that's religion.
The second thing would be religion, would be their practical religious life. But the first idea, they were unified because of who they were, which is kinship, a common soul. You must understand that Chassidus would throw in that word called neshama. Who they are is a soul. Who they are as a soul makes their identity also on some level associated with religion. Maybe not with the practice of religion, but with a religious identity. Okay, but we'll let the Rebbe do the talking. But this is what this Sikha presented to us. The Jewish people come to Har Sinai. They uncharacteristically don't complain and don't argue. They achieve a unity as one man with one heart. Number one, a unity of person, of the community, of the family, and number two, a unity of their interest. Now, the rest of the Sikha is not talking about that story, it's simply teaching us a lesson. Now, normally when I do these classes, I don't do the lessons, but this lesson I want to do. And we're reading, page 105, second column, second underline. Die Welt, wie sie ist, mitzad atzmo. The world in and of itself is a Reshus Harabim. It's a pluralistic domain. That means its nature is divisive. In welche es is nicht boilet, in which it's not self-evident, not very obvious, the shayches und verbund, the relatedness and connectedness and bond, von ein Sach mit der Zweite, of one thing and another. When you look at the world, you see division, right? You look at a community, look at people, you see division, you see what separates them. Und da sagt sich heraus euch in der Minha Bedaber b'fnei atzmei. This shows itself also amongst the human beings alone, or befrat and specifically. And then the Rebbe goes on to talk about the fact that human beings are incredibly divergent, right? If you meet 100 lions, or 100 antelope, or 100 ducklings, there's going to be differences in personality. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be differences in personality. But the differences in personality versus the commonality of personality is insignificant. They're basically the same. Human beings, because of their intelligence and their depth, show a much greater diversity of mind and heart and spirit than animals would. And the Gemara actually says that no two human beings are alike. Each one of us is very, very distinct. So our nature as human beings is pluralistic. The Rebbe is arguing all of creation is pluralistic, but in no place is that pluralism more emphasized than the pluralism that exists among human beings. Now let's continue to read. 106, turn the page. That in Welt, the idea that in a world of divergence, in a world of separations, which is the world at large, and the human group, people like to use the word species. I don't like to use the word species, but I use it anyway, specifically, is to be divergent. The phenomenon of unity in Welt, the inyan ha'achtos of Welt, that in the world there should be union, is verbunden mit dem Gili von Beide Oi. It has to do with the Creator, who is one, Adeshem Echad, the one God, was his Hechef in Welt, that's above the world. we're very divergent, right? We're all very different, but we come from a convergent common point, namely Hashem. And in Hashem, we're all one. So the way we live our lives on the simple level, what you see is our diversity, we see is what separates us. If we manage to achieve some kind of a union, some kind of a unity, some kind of an integration, some kind of an achdus, it's because we're accessing the God within the world. We are accessing the God within the group that translates into unity overriding the natural condition of diversity and divergence. Okay? Hashem is unity. Let's continue to read. However, the idea that because God is one, and He's the creator of the world, so when He shows Himself in the world, you'll see unity in the world also. Tut sich auf durch zwei Sachen is connected to two things, welche sein Herrschaftswelt that are both outside of the world, but they're two separate things. Number one, Torah, and number two, Yisrael. Are you with me? Second paragraph in 140 and 106. Torah is above the world. The Jewish people are above the world. In Torah, there is unity. In the Jewish people as such, there is unity. In other words, as they're outside of the world, there is unity. They're very distinctive. Okay, so now, if the world represents pluralism, the world represents diversity, the world represents division, dissent, lack of cohesion, and Torah and Yisrael represent unity, which represents unity more, which represents unity higher, which represents unity, whatever word you want to use. Let's read. Says the Rebbe, Loi Pirish Rashi Pshuta Shemika, page 106, first column at the bottom. Rashi's opinion, and Rashi is giving you a 5-year-old point of view. Rashi speaks to us as if we're children. Whereas, since at that particular moment, in fact, is that Geman der Zman von Matan Torah had not yet been given, says the Rebbe, Ken men nit sagen, you cannot say, as der Gile be'osid, that the fact that in the future the Torah would be given, and if and when the Torah would be given, we would achieve a unity of common interest, we would achieve a unity of common purpose. Hat frier gepelt auf sie die Achdus initially affected a unity in them. Nor the Achdus, rather the unity is gekommen mitzad the Yidden Gufa, the unity the Jewish people experienced because the Torah had not yet been given, had to do with the Jewish people themselves, in other words, their neshama.
Is that why after when they received the Torah they complained and they argued and complained?
They did that before and they did that after. And they're still doing it.
I thought they were quiet before they received the Torah.
No. Before Har Sinai they traveled 8 or 9 times. Each time they traveled, they argued and complained. This was unique in comparison to before as well as in comparison to after. They may be different. But the Rebbe is arguing, when we came to Har Sinai, we didn't have a Torah yet. The only thing that bound us was our soul, was our genes, as I called it in the last hour. Our self-identity, our familial, our biological, our essence, unity. But what would Chassidus say about that? Chassidus say these words, Mitzad bechinas yechide from the Yiddish neshama. Our being family, our being one, is a genetic thing, it's a biological thing, it's not a spiritual thing. But it has a deeply spiritual aspect. Because there's something called the Pintel Yid, the Yechide Shebenefesh. Now, is the Pintel Yid a religious thing or a Jewish thing? Is the Pintel Yid part of our religious identity or our familial identity? The answer is that's where those two become one. I told this to you last week. There's certain things that you see in the world that really move you. I teach in Besifka, I teach seminary girls. They're about the same age as you are. But if I may say so, you're looking from the outside in. Some of those girls are on the inside looking out. Not all of them, but some of them. And they're busy with Narishkeiten. And periodically they'll come to school and show me something interesting that they found online. You know, whatever it is, all these mediums for social groupings, which is whatever. So one of the girls came to me one time with a page. A guy had written, it was Hanukkah time, and he wrote, I love the Jewish religion. It's the only religion where you can be an atheist and you're still a Jew. I told this to you last week. So I said to the girls, I saw this, I sent it out to the girls. I said to them, how religious is this statement? I'm an atheist and I'm still a Jew. What in heaven's name is the meaning of the word Jew if he's an atheist? So as the expression Yiddish is, I'm trying very, very hard to become an atheist, and with God's help I'll get there. You see, This little passage reflects, let's put it this way, the confusion of a Jew. What is a Jew? A Jew's confused because he doesn't understand what he is. I remember years ago, this is way back, my memory is foggy, so I don't remember if I was single or married. That's sort of the demarcation point in my life. But I remember the Soviet Union. I was in the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union. I remember the collapse of the Soviet Union. I remember the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And I've seen Yiddishkeit in Russia today, which is absolutely incredible. It's amazing. I was sitting this morning, one of my boys put on music after the davening when the kids were eating breakfast. So he put on songs from a Jewish group from the 1970s. Half the songs are about the Holocaust and half the songs about Soviet Jews. And I'm sitting and crying, and the boys are laughing at me. I said, you have to understand, I remember this. I remember a time that a Jew living in Russia didn't exist. There were millions of them. There was zero contact. Zero. It's so hard to imagine. It's just a few years. It's in my lifetime. Today you get in a plane, you go to Russia, no trouble. Now you can't get from Russia to the Ukraine, but you can get from Russia to Israel, from the Ukraine to Israel. Yeah. It's remarkable to see. What I have lived is it's pashut, unreal. Anyway, but when this was all coming apart, so Russia, Gorbachev, who orchestrated all of this, was hoping to control it. He let the cat out of the bag. He created openness, perestroika and glasnost. I'm not going to expect you to know these words. You weren't born. One of these words meant financial liberalization, which meant people could have private enterprise, and the other meant social liberalization, which meant you were allowed to criticize the government, and there could be more than one party, and there could be dissenting newspapers. And Russia, there was no such thing. There was one newspaper and one party and one voice and one truth. And he was hoping, the reason Gorbachev did it was because he realized that he's losing the Cold War. They were no longer able to compete. We had a Cold War. You don't remember the Cold War. The Cold War was a war. It was cold, but it was a war. In other words, there were no bullets, but it was a real war. The Cold War was fought in the laboratory. The Cold War was fought in the plants that built better ships, better planes, better tanks, better computers, and better nuclear bombs that could travel thousands of miles and kill millions of people. It's unreal. And the Soviets competed with us. And for decades, they kept up. A huge percentage of their GNP. If I remember the numbers, we at that time were putting into military, let's say 12%. They were putting in 50 to 60% of GNP just to compete with us about nuclear weapons. And then they couldn't do it anymore. They just didn't have enough money. People were starving. So Gorbachev decided that he's going to give some liberalism so people would make more money, and he'd be able to have more money to build more bombs to continue the Cold War. But the minute he created a crack in the veneer, the wall that was the Sovietske Soyuz, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, it blew up like a dam. And the people poured through it in the millions. And they had only one recourse. They had one option: to kill millions of Russians on the streets of Russia. They could have pulled back. That would have been the cost. And they were hesitant. They were not Stalin, just not crazy enough. And the Soviet Union fell apart. Over the course of 5, 6, or 7 years, I watched it happen. I was already, when it started, I was 19 years old. When it finished, I was probably 28 or 29. But this happened to me in my lifetime. I watched it unfold. During that period of time, the government of Russia wanted to bridge relations with the West, not just with the Western government, but with the Western people. There was what you would call goodwill. It was an exciting time, and today America is more suspicious of Russia than we were in 1989, and 1990, 1991. I would argue, but okay, that's a different conversation. So they had international broadcasts. I remember listening to a radio broadcast where you had the President of the United States, who was George Bush, the father, George H. Bush, or Herbert Bush, I think he was. But I mix up the H and the W, so if you know, you can correct me. And Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the the general secretary of the Politburo of the Soviet Union. In other words, the two most powerful men in the world, literally. And the third person was Boris Yeltsin. He was the president of the Russian Federation. He was instrumental in pushing this revolution. And there was an international broadcast on the radio where Americans called in and Russians called in. It was fast, and everything was in Russian and in English, so you had to wait for everything to be translated. And it was slow, but it was so delightful. To me, it was like Mashiach was coming. You couldn't imagine for this to happen. And the one thing I remember listening to the broadcast, the one thing I remember was somebody called up and said, "Do you believe in God?" And President Bush said, "Yes." And Boris Yeltsin said, "Yes." And I can hear Mikhail Gorbachev, as long as I live, I'll hear the words, "Ya, atheist." I am an atheist. That's what he said. But he brought down the Soviet Union. But they had regular broadcasts. Now, the regular broadcasts did not feature the presidents. The voice of Radio Moscow, I mean, again, this is all history to you. There was always the propaganda was a big deal. Meaning to say, in the West, we were pumping Western propaganda into the Soviet Union, right? It was called the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. And we called it Air America. Air America was a radio station which was broadcasting only into Russia. If you lived in New York, you couldn't pick it up. And it was shortwave, and the Russians had to secretly have their radios, and they went to listen to Air America so they could get another version or a truer version of what's happening in the world. And the Russians had Radio Moscow. The voice of Radio Moscow was a man whose name was Vladimir Pozner. Vladimir Pozner, my great-grandmother was a Pozner. We're probably cousins. Vladimir Pozner considered himself a Jew. I've heard that his mother wasn't Jewish, which makes him not a Jew. I don't know. I'm going to go with the presumption that Vladimir Pozner was Jewish. And his counterpart was a leftist, a very little American Jew, whose name was Phil Donahue. It's amazing that I remember this. And they would talk. And there would be people calling in. And it was Russia's way of reaching the American street, not just reaching the American government street. Vladimir Pozner was born in New York. He was an American-born Jew, or American-born, like some people call zebra. He moved back to Russia as a child with his parents, either in the 40s or the 50s, in the belief that they were moving from the cruel Western capitalist realm of the selfish to the optimum and ideal and altruistic realm of utopia, where all people are created equal and all the rest of that stuff. The Russian ideals are much better than the American ideals, except that they don't work. Otherwise, they're brilliant. And he was born in America. English was his first language, and he grew up in Russia. So he was the perfect candidate. He was Radio Moscow. He was the propaganda arm of the Soviet Union to the West, probably for 30 years. And now I've heard interviews of him later, more recently, where he claims that so much of what he said he didn't believe of. But let me tell you, it was quite convincing. And I was young, and I spent a lot of time listening to these broadcasts. Today I have no patience. I have no patience for politics at all. I've grown so fatigued. I have so little respect for our leaders. It's tragic. It's sad. I mean, you'll get there slowly. But when I was younger, I was a believer. I mean, I was a child. I was a teenager when Ronald Reagan was president. Ronald Reagan made you a believer. Trust me. He made everybody a believer. But the last president we had like Ronald Reagan was Ronald Reagan. And before that, maybe John Kennedy. John Kennedy was a Democrat. But they were presidents. They were presidents. They weren't just people sitting in the White House. They were presidents. But anyway, I digress. So in the middle of this radio broadcast, Vladimir Pozner suddenly asks the question, what is a Jew? There was some kind of a context to it. He says, you can't call it a religion. I'm an atheist and I'm Jewish. Can't call it a race, because you have black Jews and you have white Jews and you have red Jews and you have tan Jews and you have, what are the word they use? Olive Jews. Jews of all sizes and shapes and colors, tall, thin, blonde ones with blue eyes, and short, stocky, plump ones with stubby fingers and small ears, and everything in between. So it's not a race, it's not a religion, it's not a race, it's not a culture. You have Eastern Jews, and he went through every single demographical delineation. And he said a Jew is not a race, it's not a religion, it's not a culture, it's not a nationality. he refuted any effort at defining the word Jew. And he finished the sentence by saying, what is a Jew? And he left it at that. And I literally shouted at my radio. A neshama. He set the question up so perfectly, he just didn't draw the conclusion. The word Jew means something that's so deep inside of us, it's by definition not explicable. Our yechida, our pintalayid. What is the pintalayid? It's a real thing that you truly cannot explain because it's beyond explanation. So he did the whole segue. He brought you till the conclusion. But he's an atheist, in quotations. And as such, he was not able to articulate the point. You cannot understand the Jew. Not because it doesn't have a definition, but because its definition literally exceeds the phenomenon of the human mind. So let's go back to the Sikha now, okay? Until this second session that we started to learn at whatever, 11:45, we were arguing that there's two definitions to a Jew, a familial definition and a religious definition, correct? And they're separate. Now, we're not changing that. But we're adding to the familial definition that at the base of our family unit is God. In other words, when you're talking about Pinta Yid, the separation between the familial unity, the familial bond, and the spiritual, emotional, becomes vague. It becomes not so crisp because the Yechida Shebenefesh is the foundation of our religious identity. Our Pinta Yid is the beginning of our religious identity, and it is absolutely our familial identity. Okay? I'm going to start from page 106, second column, second line. Nor, the Achdos has gekommen, the unity, remember the Torah has not yet been given, the unity came, mitzad the Yidden Gufim, the Jewish people themselves, translates the Rebbe, mitzad bechinas yechida for the Yiddish neshama, the point in the Jewish soul which we call yechida, or we translate it as the Pinta Yid. Says the Rebbe, and Tavadas, it's beyond reason. It's beyond logic. And if beyond logic, we can't debate what religion is based on logic. Mitzadinu kudas hayadus, it's the pinta yid, it's the point of Jewishness, versus sheira beike belev, which rests primarily in the heart. Okay, hat das gewirkt und gepeilt. It therefore affected, and influenced, and affected the Miyich and Shamisal Kishachad rested as one man. So the Rebbe says, hey, we learned a Sikh, and we're interpreting a Mechilt, a Chazal. Right? Let's call it a Gemara for purposes of simplification. What are we interpreting? Why the unity amongst the Jews as they came to Mount Sinai started with their familial unity and it only ended with their religious unity. They didn't have the religion yet, but they had a family identity. So Kish Echad means that they identified familially. Belev Echad, once they identified as a family, familially, as a community, as a family, it spilled over into having the same heart, the same in Yiddishkeit. So the Rebbe says, mystically, you want to add that the familial unity comes down to our God essence. And our God essence is about our familial unity, but it's about our religion. It's where the two converge. And accordingly, you go from being bonded because of your family bond, and you continue to being bonded because of your religious identity. It spills over into it because in the Ki'ish Echad, which means the human, the familial identity, you have the beginning of the Belev Echad, the Neshama. Do you understand?
How did they get bonded by religion? I don't understand.
Okay, let me give you a form. Jewish identity is attributed to 2 points in history. Number 1, Abraham. Number 2, Moses. What's the difference? I'll tell you the difference. In Tanya, the difference is when we identify with Abraham, we're identifying on the level of our soul. When we identify with Moses, we identify the level of our body. Okay, and of course, when it comes to the body, there's no difference between the Jewish body and the non-Jewish body, so what it means the Jewish body becomes a little bit complicated. But practically the difference is, from Avraham Avinu we inherited our Jewish neshama. From Moshe Rabbeinu we inherited our Jewish Torah, our Jewish way of life. Now, is the Jewish neshama separated or connected to the Jewish Torah? That's a question. Huh? When you answer a question with a question, you didn't answer it. It's deeply connected. It's separate, but it's deeply connected. Right? A Jew who's not religious, who has a pintel yid, is very Jewish. And often that pintel yid will show itself in acts of heroism or in other kinds of very profound ways. He's not practicing religion, but his Jewish identity, which affects an expression that's unique, that's Jewish, it's a part of who he is or a part of who she is, but ultimately it's connected to the religion. It's two separate things, but they're very close together. So the Rebbe is presenting us with the Ish Echad B'Lev Echad. The union of the Jewish people at that time began with their familial union because the Torah had not yet been given, but it spilled over into the religious union, to B'Lev Echad. Why? Because the Jewish identity, even though it's a familial identity, at its base is connected to God and religion. You understand? Yeah. Any other questions or comments? So we're going to read on, okay? So now I'm on page 107. V'bal. I'm just finishing the Sikha now, okay? V'bal, das kol echad ve'echad chayav leimer. Whereas, in as much as every Jew is obligated to say, B'shvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. And the Rebbe says in Yiddish, Atzilib'im, is b'shafeng gewandt the grandson, the whole world was created for him. Dav der Rebbe jede Yid sich mishtatel sein. Every Jew must make every effort. K'chol ha'tolei bei, as much as he possibly can, meifet sein Teire v'yad, the sufficient Yidden to teach Teire and Yiddishkeit to Jews. And in the line that I didn't underline, the Rebbe continues, he says, and teach the 7 laws of Noach to Goyim. What the Rebbe is saying is that the Chassidus of the Sikha is that although there are two definitions of the cohesion of the Jewish people, the first definition of the cohesion of the Jewish people is a familial, is a genetic, is a kin bonding. And the second is a religious bonding. We do the same Torah and do mitzvahs. Says the Rebbe, you should know they're very connected. What is the point where our genealogical and familial bond and our religious and cultural bond converge? The answer is our neshama. Our neshama is not yet our religious life, but it's the beginning of our religious life. It's the source of our religious life. And it's the deepest point of our familial bonding. So the Rebbe says, if you're a Jew, you need Judaism. Why? Because if you're a Jew, you're bound to other Jews by familial strings, but at the base of that Jewishness is a piece of God, is Yechidah Shebenefesh, which wants to do Torah and mitzvahs. So one spills over into the next. So in the Sikha, it's because we became bonded because of our genes, naturally we became bonded because of our religion. Because our genes come down to Yechidah, and from the Yechidah we're all interested, and from Yechidah which we're all interested, we do Torah mitzvahs. So they're separate but connected. And that's the meaning of the words Kish Echad B'Lev Echad, one man with one heart. First of all, one man. At the base of that one man is a Yechidah, and that's connected to religion indirectly. And from there you come to Lev Echad. So the Rebbe therefore says that's why we have an obligation to teach other Jewish people about Judaism, because it's really already theirs on the level of their neshama. Questions? Comments? I'm not learning to see it with you, but I want to start it. Now in this Sikha, they're related. That's why we learn them sequentially, yeah. We don't learn Sikhas in the Pash. We have a vision of what we want to do. We're going through the story of the Chumash, taking our merry time. And we happened to be holding yesterday. Last week, it was coincidentally, it was the Chitas of Wednesday. But that just worked out that way. This Sikha is going to speak about Jewish unity, but it's going to be much more connected to Torah than the last Sikha. The Sikha that we just completed talks about Jewish unity being first of all familial and then second of all religious. In this Sikha, there's going to be a much, much stronger emphasis on the unity being connected to our religious identity, not just to our familial identity. But it begins the same way. So let's read just a bisele, okay? Page 108, you have it? Israel rested there adjacent to the mountain. Says the Mechilta, Kol Mokim Hu'ema V'Yisrael V'Yachanum. In all the other places, the Jewish people traveled and rested as a plural, as a collective group. In other words, every time they traveled, every time they rested, there was a division, there was a descent. At this point, they became one heart. Page 109, first column. When Rashi says, that kol hachaniyos b'tumas hamachlekes, that all of their restings were with complaints and arguments, made them inyan from tarumas hamachlekes. He means complaining to God and arguing with one another in poshet and zin, in the simplest sense of the word, kigerai. Whenever the Jewish people traveled, they argued, but they argued not like nice guys, like professors in university. They argued passionately. They argued with real, almost fighting. Like the Mechilta, according to the Medrash, is the Pirish Machlekes, the meaning of their division, nit in dem Zin from Krieg and Zich. They were not fighting in the Hepech HaShalom, a lack of unity kind of a way. Not Hepech von Leib Echad. The lack of unity was in their hearts. Chilukei Deis, different perspectives, different points of view. Since the nature of all of humankind, and certainly of the Jewish people, that we don't have the same mind, is when many people have to do one thing. It becomes an absolute requisite, a necessity to fashidin ideias, to a variety of different points of view, vidas to ton how to do it, and so on. Machlokes, according to the Mechilot, doesn't mean they were fighting. Machlokes means that everything that Hashem gave them can have more than one interpretation. So Rashi holds, Machlokes means they didn't get along. The Mechilot holds, Machlokes means they disagreed about what to do. Right? So what's the Ish Echad Lev Echad? That even though they disagreed, here they came to agree. Look at the next paragraph, the bracketed one. The chassidus behind this is as follows: as the Membeis Masoris b'midbar, the 42 travels in the deserts and the Meramas of Membeis Madreges Valias Navitas Hashem. When the Jewish people physically travel, they travel 42 times. Each physical journey symbolized a spiritual climb. So what happens if you're being forced to grow spiritually at a very fast pace? You complain and you argue. Says the Rebbe, every Jew is different in how he understands the meaning of this growth. By Yeder is the Aliyah laid Zayin Dargan Avodas Hashem. Each person has his own Avodas Hashem. Laid Zayin Levavacha Nafshecha B'decha, go to his heart, his soul, and all of his power. So the complaining was about matters of religion. They were complaining about the fact that they were journeying. Because they moved from one place to another. They knew that Hashem's moving them is a spiritual journey, and they complained about the rapidity of their movement. It's happening too fast. That's what they argued about. Says the Rebbe, but here was a chiddush. They came to Har Sinai, and in spite of the fact that they used to argue and complain about the rapid movement, here they all agreed. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Questions or comments? And I mean it.